Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the rest of your lives. We are very pleased to be serving as your judges here today. And please don't forget, students, to introduce your teachers and mentors after you introduce yourselves. My name is Tom Tinder and I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
Good morning. My name is Emmanuel Caudillo, Senior Advisor with the White House Hispanic Prosperity Initiative in Washington, D.C.
Good morning. I'm Jen Howell, Co-Executive Director of Virginia Civics, the home of the Virginia We the People program.
Hi, I'm Maggie Lynch. I'm the captain of Unit 3 at Fishers Junior High in Fishers, Indiana.
Hi, I'm Lincoln Bass.
I'm Navi Singh.
Hi, I'm Ella Robertson, and our instructors are Mike Fosselt and Tony Sturgeon.
Okay, you know which question. It's going to be question number 2, and let me read it to you very quickly. No society, certainly not a large and heterogeneous one, can fail in time to explode if it is deprived of the arts of compromise. No good society can be unprincipled, and no viable society can be principle-ridden, close quote. Do you agree or disagree with this opinion? What compromises were made at the Constitutional Convention of 1787? What are the benefits and costs of those compromises? How would you distinguish between someone who is unprincipled and someone who is principle-ridden? You may begin.
There were multiple compromises at the Constitutional Convention. The most important one was the Connecticut Compromise, which is now known as the Great Compromise, which set equal representation in the Senate and proportional representation in the House. There are also compromises surrounding slavery, the first being the 3/5 Compromise. Found in Article 1, Section 2, this compromise counted slaves as 3/5 of a person when figuring population and for representation and taxation purposes, but was changed by the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery. Along with the 3/5 compromise, there was the Fugitive Slave Clause, laid out in Article 4, Section 2, and stated that if a slave ran away into a different state, the owner could repossess a slave. The Trade Compromise let the national government have control of trade between states and other countries, but let state governments have control of trade in their own states. The Presidency Compromise was between people who supported states' rights and people who wanted a stronger federal government. Article 2, Section 1 states that the president serves 4-year terms along with the vice president.
Originally, there were no term limits, but the 22nd Amendment changed that to a maximum of 2 terms. A final compromise was the agreement to create a Bill of Rights after ratification. Anti-Federalists opposed ratification and wanted a Bill of Rights to protect people from a strong federal government. This ratification compromise was a final step in getting the Constitution passed. Without many of these compromises, the Constitution would not have been ratified, but there were costs to them as well, as the benefits already stated. The cost of the 3/5 compromise still had a lasting effect in the United States. When slaves were considered 3/5 of a person, it set the tone of how the country would treat African American people and how white people would always believe they were superior. A benefit of the 3/5 compromise was the fact that it took power away from the southern states, because instead of getting full representation for their slaves, they only counted as 3/5 of a person.
This means they got less representation than they wanted. The Great Compromise was necessary to ratify our Constitution, and it did set up our government today. But it violated the idea of one person, one vote, since each senator represents a different amount of people in each state. The Trade Compromise gave states powers they feared of losing after the Articles of Confederation. But it also promoted slavery, which added to our country's long train of abuse on African Americans. For society to have compromise and function properly, there must be a balance between being principle-ridden and being unprincipled. An example of a time when our country was unprincipled was when the 3/5 compromise was ratified. The decision was made quickly to ratify our Constitution instead of being made for the good of all of the people. But things done by principle-ridden people as well are not always the best decisions. People's actions may be viewed as principled by some, but not by all. This can be seen with the violence that occurred at the Capitol on January 6th.
The principle-ridden people involved in the attack had strong enough beliefs that they invaded their own country's Capitol building while Congress was in session. Our unit believes that we are lacking compromise in our current government and society because of how principle-ridden our representatives are. The 2 major political parties are in constant battle for power, resulting in little compromise. Something that we believe would allow for more compromise to happen within our government would be if we eliminated the filibuster. An example of compromise not being able to happen was in 2012 after the Sandy Hook shooting. A bill that would require background checks was not approved by the Senate. It was supported by 54 senators, but opposed by 46, who only represented 38% of the population. This is one example in our government's history where the minority ended up controlling the majority. This proves that in order for a government to run smoothly, there must be a balance between speed and becoming cautious of the effects these decisions will have on the people within the United States. There must be middle ground found where both principle-ridden and unprincipled people don't feel suppressed. We've finished our testimony and are now ready for follow-up.
Thank you. I'd like your opinions on one issue that relates to our national government, and that is the Electoral College. There are some people that think there need to be some changes made in Electoral College. There's other people who think that we ought to just have a popular vote election. What's your opinion and why?
Our
I
unit
believe
believes. Our unit believes. Oh, yes.
Sorry. Our unit believes that we should eliminate the Electoral College or move to ranked choice voting, which is what I believe, because it would allow for more third-party candidates to be elected. And the problem with the Electoral College is that it does not always go with the popular vote. This can be seen 5 times, with the most recent being former President Donald Trump. And it also happened a few years before with former President George W. Bush.
And now the Electoral College does not follow the idea of one person, one vote.
Along with that, the original intention for the Electoral College was to avoid uneducated voters. And so that now there's so much access to figuring out who we're getting represented by and who we're electing into office.
As I agree with my unit that we should eliminate the Electoral College, we realized that a argument for the Electoral College is that switching to popular vote would possibly have the large cities in our country control the small cities, making politicians only want to campaign in those large cities.
The next question is, compromise is often called an art. Is that an apt description? Why or why not?
I would consider an art because you have to deal with all these things, different ideas, people representing everyone, and bring all these ideas into one thing and being able to say, well, yeah, we can take this side and we can take this side and we can put them together in a certain way that makes everybody happy and makes it look good and presentable for everybody.
I agree with my colleague Lincoln, and I also think that it is considered an art because it's truly hard to master, as we can see within our government today. There's little compromise, which we truly need.
One of the ways or examples of how little compromise we have in our government is the national budget. We haven't had a new national budget since 1996.
And I agree with my colleagues with saying it is an art because when people do finally compromise, it can have good effects, like we can see in the Senate, how a bill that would stop anti-Asian hate crimes was passed 94-1, and that's going to be helping the community and the country. So having that compromise was helpful, and I'd say an art.
Do you think it's become more difficult for Americans to compromise over some of today's major issues? And if you think it's become more difficult, why?
I definitely do think it has become more difficult to compromise because of not only how party-ridden our representatives are, but how party-ridden our country is. People make decisions in daily life, and our representatives make decisions in our government that basically go along with what their party says, so they're not willing to compromise with each other.
And our representatives are a lot more worried about getting reelected than they are about compromise. And for the primaries, they don't want to be seen as too much of the opposite party.
Along with that, it doesn't really like Maggie and Navi both said, we're so party ridden, and someone just elects based on how oh, if this elector is, oh, they're with the Republican Party, oh, I'm just going to elect them because I identify as a Republican. And so there's no really looking on who you're actually electing and what they're going to do for the country and make your society better.
The founders, some of the founders were principle ridden and some were unprincipled. based upon your understanding of those two terms, tell us a national leader today who you consider to be principle ridden and one that's unprinciple ridden in your opinion. Unprincipled in your opinion.
I would say, so like with the founders of our country, it's so hard to pinpoint if they're principle ridden or unprincipled, because people like George Washington are like, they were the fathers of our country, as many people say, and they created our government. But they also had some negative things, like many of them owned slaves, which could be seen as unprincipled. And today, the politicians or people in our government that I would call unprincipled are the people that flip-flop on issues or always are changing what they say, which I would say that was someone like former President Donald Trump, who would at one moment say he supported like the LGBTQ community, and then in the next moment would create a bill that was going against them.
I agree with my colleague Ella that former President Donald Trump was very unprincipled because he did not stick to his values, and he was more about the power that the president position held than actually making decisions that would benefit our country.
And there have been multiple times in our country's history where we thought something was good at the time, but now that we look back on it, it's bad. An example would be slavery.
My next question. I'm gonna make this say. Based off your presentation, you mentioned that one key thing to try to increase compromise, and correct me if I'm wrong. To increase compromise would be to eliminate the filibuster. But if you take out the filibuster, then it doesn't allow, you would practically allow the majority to be able to pass, as long as they got 51 votes, or 50 if they have the presidency, to put in there whatever they would like to put in. If you got rid of the filibuster, what would be things you would think of, this is just opinion, use to replace it in order to ensure that there's compromise in the US Senate?
Well, I do believe that we should eliminate the filibuster because I can see the point was to promote compromise. But now, since, as we stated earlier, our representatives are so party ridden. So I believe either changing the filibuster where you have to actually talk, or some representatives have been proposing the idea of having multiple sessions where the amount of people who have to vote for a bill changes after the debates. I can't remember the exact name of this idea, but I agree with that, where it would lower and still have compromise, but make it easier.
Along with that, I think there would be certain versions that would come out of the filibuster instead of like such a high 60 votes, or yeah, I think 60 votes would come in. I think they would lower it just a little bit so that there actually doesn't seem like, oh, well, I like where representatives can say, oh, well, I like that bill. I want to like vote. That'll really help the country. And so they're allowed to like vote along with that. And so if it's a little lower, I think that will add to more compromise.
As well, I think the biggest thing that the biggest reason why the filibuster is harmful today is our representatives not willing to compromise with each other, and even back, which can be seen when the civil rights era was going on. Southern senators used the filibuster to block legislation such as anti-lynching bills.
I think that we should keep the filibuster only if we were able to change it and bring back its original purpose, which was to create more compromise within our government. But now all it does is create more party divide.
Thank you very much. Good job. We now have some comments for you. I just want you to know that it's very comforting, but also, well, when you start out, you're just very eager, and that's you just can't wait for us to ask the question. You can't wait to make your presentation, and I just commend you on that, because it really increases our eagerness, because you're so eager. We want to get ready and have a good discussion with you. So I just say that to you from the get-go. Your opening 4-minute presentation was very very good. You brought up some things we hadn't heard before, and you also, in describing some of those compromises, gave us some examples that were excellent. You talked about the budget. You talked about the Asian hate bill and so forth. Just very well done in answering the questions and providing us with examples. And then I thought you did a good job initially in a suggestion that we made to you yesterday about give us both sides of the argument. You did a good job initially in answering the question and telling us both sides of the issue. But was a little bit, I must tell you, a little bit disappointed when I asked you the question about principled leaders who were just hesitant to stay one. But you know the difference between unprincipled and principled. And that I thought was a softball question, and I was waiting for you to hit it out of the park. And I was interested in hearing from each of you who you unprincipled. So other than that, I thought overall you did a set a high bar yesterday with your presentation, and you got up to that bar again today. I just, and coaches and mentors, and you all are just inspiring. It's just wonderful to have the opportunity to talk with young people like yourselves that have so much knowledge and leadership capabilities and so much interest in what's going on in today's world. We're going to be in good hands with you as leaders in your community and in your state and in our nation and in your school system. So congratulations to you. Thank you so much, and the very best of luck to you.
I want to commend you on an excellent presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I just love the way you work together, and there's a synergy between you all that you're always helping each other out. You're always you complement each other really well. So I'm not sure if y'all chose your team together or that was assigned to you by your teachers, but whatever way system, it worked because you could see it in the way you present and the way everything just flows real well, and it's very easy to follow your presentation. So I commend you on that. Let's see here. So I love there's a phrase you said during one of the discussion period, party ridden. We were talking about principle ridden, but we talk about party ridden. People who are like so focused on their political party. It's what the RNC or DNC says or whatnot, and that's something to take a look at. Take a look at here. And so today isn't so much principle, but maybe it's party ridden. So thank you for bringing that up. I circled that many times. And the one thing I knew why you are well prepared and know your stuff is because that last question I sent to you was a challenge question. I was thinking of another question to ask, but I'm like, I think they're ready for this question. Let me go to challenge them on eliminating the filibuster and saying, I want to make sure you know what you're doing if you're saying let's get rid of it. And you provide me an incredible answer with suggestions to not just get rid of it, but reform it to ensure that it's being used in its original intent, which was to create compromise, not necessarily to just be not something just to be used as to stop debate. And so I like that. I love that answer. Thank you so much for sharing it. I commend you as you continue your journey through civic engagement, continue doing it, continue participating in these events and engaging in your community through civic engagement. And I thank you so much, and best of luck to you.
I completely agree with my colleagues. This was an excellent presentation. It was an excellent conversation. I really liked, at one point you described the country as unprincipled, not people in the country, like not specific persons, but we as a country were unprincipled. And that really started to make me think, sort of what happened, what is it that makes a country unprincipled? And, I don't think I was going to ask you about that in the next question. I was really hoping we would get to that, and you really, really made me think in a way that I hadn't before about sort of the national character and what that does for us and sort of how that helps to drive us in one direction or another. So I really like that you made me think so much about this. The other thing I really liked is that this can be a question that gets very theoretical, right? That's sort of philosophical. What is a compromise? What is principled versus unprincipled, moral versus immoral? All of these questions. And you guys made it very concrete for us. You gave us some very specific examples that helped us to ground this conversation in things that actually happened in the past and things that are actually happening now. And I thought you just did a masterful job of that. So thank you for such an excellent presentation, an excellent weekend. And you guys are going to do great things, I have no doubt. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
judges. We really appreciate you guys taking time with our kids.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great job. I'm going to go ahead and send the judges to their breakout room. Good luck the rest